I'm Carlos Navarro from AXA. With Anna and David, we are a significant part of our open source program office in AXA. And we will explain you our journey in open source. Also in InnerSource, because it's more open source, open strategy program office. Now InnerSource is very important everywhere. So you will see what has been our strategy and our journey for open source, but also for InnerSource at AXA. Okay. Let's wait for a minute. Oh, maybe we can start.
I think on the screen you have a notice.
In my screen?
Yes, you have.
Oh yeah. Wow, it will be difficult.
Okay. Now.
Yeah. Okay. So let's start with an icebreaker. I wanted to know if you have knowledge about InnerSource and what is your profile. So I don't know if you are developers or managers or architects. So raise your hands and just lower your hands if you are coders, so developers, data scientists. Okay, half. And then if you are managers or executives or something, you can lower your hand. Architects like me. Okay, 50-50. Okay, so this is a game I created with Copilot. It's completely vibe coding. If you can join it if you want. Let's see if it starts. Yeah, it's a kind of a joke. It's amazing how Copilot instructed me or replaced me to work, to create a Node.js application based on Vite and Tailwind CSS and other components I never know about them. So in the backend part, replaced me very good, very well. In the front-end part, it just catch my bad taste, as you can see here. So it cloned my bad taste. So, but at the end, it's an excuse just to make you ask yourselves a few questions about what open source is. If you play a bit with the tool, you can. Let's see, we can close it. It's a bit difficult. If you play with the tool, you will see that at the end you have these questions there. If the question is about openness and you ask the question right, the ball, the open source, the InnerSource Commons logo will bounce towards the inner side, to the open side. If it's about closeness, about proprietariness, will bounce to the right, and so on. But at the end, the takeaway is that InnerSource is just in the middle. So we have a very clear idea of what open source is. It's 40 years free and open source. It's been 40 years in the market since 1985. GPL Manifesto started all this thing. InnerSource is younger, from 2000, was coined by Tim O'Reilly. So we know what open source is. We know what copyleft licenses, freedom, permissiveness is, Apache licenses, Mint, and so on. We know it by far. But when you ask somebody what InnerSource is, we have a lot of different answers. What is clear is that there is a common answer that is that InnerSource is open source behind firewalls or open source inside your internal network. Okay, what does it mean? People, it's not. It's a good picture, by the way. Mapping InnerSource inside your company. That's the exercise we took when we started thinking about InnerSource. We position ourselves as observers of open source. So open source is in the outer world. If I use outer, will be for open source. InnerSource, it's kind of a world or a sphere inside this bigger sphere that is open source. This sphere is your company, and the surface of the sphere is the boundaries of your company. So InnerSource happens inside your company, while open source happens in the outer world. Okay, so it's clear what open source is. To understand what InnerSource is, or what do you want for InnerSource to be, you have to position yourselves inside this smaller sphere in your company. Okay, if you do so, then you are behind your firewalls. And then you have to take decisions here. It's important to take decisions. Our decision was that we wanted to, for our new world, the company, For some of us, company could be our only world. That's not healthy, but let's imagine that company is our only world. If we are inside this universe or this world, the important part for us was openness. So we wanted InnerSource to be open. Everybody in our company should have access to InnerSource. Okay, that was our main objective. But then you have problems, right? What happens with people that are part of this inner world but doesn't belong to this inner world? Contractors, for example. What happens if contractors access code that is property of this company? Well, you have a problem here. So we have met a lot of companies that solve this problem by restricting access to different projects. But if you restrict access, you complicate a lot the management of InnerSource, and you are kind of making InnerSource another closed source project in your company. So there is a problem here. So people prefer to open the InnerSource little by little and restrict access. We prefer the openness, because at the end, if you think long term, you think you want InnerSource embraced by any employee and foster innovation and so on. So that was our view. But when you have a problem, what happens with these aliens of your inner world that access your InnerSource licenses, right? Your InnerSource source code. Then you have to invest on their licenses. What are the right clauses in your licenses that protect you, that make the InnerSource your property, and prepares you perhaps to litigate if somebody is stealing your source code, right? So if you choose one option, then you lack, problems on the other side. So you have to choose. So, and what we choose was openness. So that's why our open source program office is like open strategy program office. Now we'll see how we started this journey. Sorry. Okay, again. Let's try to close it. And we better click here. Okay, that could be the right answers in our side. Perhaps you prefer to restrict access, and then that will not be the right answers. Okay, but let's try to explain what was our strategy. And here we are talking about open source, and this is kind of the mapping that you can do if you follow the Linux Foundation trainings. So at the end, you have to have a clear view of what will you manage for consuming open source, contributing open source, creating open source. We started in the very beginning. We were very extrovert, and we started with the create part. So we wanted to generate open source because our developers really wanted to create open source. That attracted talent, that created happiness in our developers. So we thought it was the right way to go. But now we are more convinced that we have to start just in the other side. For example, consume. Consume is what has better return of investment. It's very easy to convince your C-level, your managers, your CIOs, CTOs, that by consuming open source safely, you will get a faster return of investment, because the OSPO could be the governance body that at least is managing or is recommending to all the projects what are the right open source projects to use. And what is the right project to use is not always about security. Remember that we also, so in our companies normally we have board of directors, we have investors that at the end forces us to develop branding rules that position your brand image in the market. And for example, I don't know, now that now we have in very tough times, perhaps your board of directors don't want to support communities that don't like the caffeinated coffee, just to be politically correct. And therefore, if you are using an open source project that uses the caffeinated coffee, you don't want to use it internally because your company will be linked to the CAF guys. You don't want to use their source project. So it's a responsibility of the OSPO to recommend another project that is based on caffeinated code, right? Because it's better aligned with your public exposure, the public exposure of your company. So it's not always about security. There are a lot of other topics. So you have to create kind of a healthiness radar of open source to guide your projects to be compliant. and also managing everything at the end you are using, you have to manage it. You have to provide life cycles, you have to provide replacement, you have to evaluate if the project will be decommissioned soon, and you have to provide an alternative to your teams to replace and migrate from one project to the other. So it's not an easy thing. It gets a lot of return of investment. And it's quite understandable for CTOs and CIOs. Okay. Then contributors, I think, is another part that we tend to miss. And it's very important. It's very related to what we are seeing here. If you are relying on projects like Git proxy or this Calm project that we were seeing before, or Kubernetes, at the end, if you are betting for important pieces of code, it's good to create open partnership with these teams, because this is creating resilience in your teams. Okay? If you are using Kubernetes and you are not Kubernetes savvy, perhaps you have a problem. Same for any project. Okay? So you need to drive this leadership and contribute to key projects to create this kind of open partnership and establish resilience with your ecosystem, with your author, right? This is open source ecosystem. And also this brings you community presence. So your company is linked to Git proxy, for example. That's something that's good. And also, cool projects like Kubernetes also attract talent, and you create this kind of talent hub. And talent is also about, so then when we move to create, we also stress this talent thing, because people want to create open source. We have a lot of, not a lot, but quite an important group of people that are creating open source attacks, and they are very comfortable and this people is interesting. We have to retain it. People want to create open source and be visible in the world. So that's kind of our strategy. How is it going? I think that my colleagues will agree on the strategy, but we have a problem here because it's quite static. This mapping for us is quite static, so things change. So for InnerSource, we extended a bit this mapping and added this transfer domain. You will see why, but then let's do the same for InnerSource, the exercise. So what's important for InnerSource? For InnerSource, in open source, it's an ecosystem that is very healthy. There are a lot of projects, a lot of forks. Every time there is a problem with a license, for example, a fork appears, supported by the Linux Foundation. A new project grows, you can change from one project to the other. This energy is not present inside your governance. You have limited resources. You should avoid forks, right? So if we are focusing our energies in creating a project that is important for our company, we should avoid forks. We should invest in having all the talent together and contributing to the project. So InnerSource consuming is about, for us, a deal. We keep you interested in being challenged by you, but adoption is for maximizing the adoption, scaling of that project, right? So we call it prescriptive evangelization. We'll see later why. But at the end, you have to prescribe something. It's a balance between prescription and evangelization. So the project must be good. So that's more in the evangelization side. But the project must be unique, right? So it's more kind of a prescription. So you have to find this balance. Just avoid forkers and lurkers, right? So people that is just not comfortable with the project but don't want to contribute, or people that is just using the project and is not giving back anything to the project. So that are problems in InnerSource. You have limited resources inside the company. So it's important. And then for contribution and creation, that's our strategy. Okay, ensure openness, maximize openness, more than restricting access. So we don't believe in restricting access. If you are restricting access, you don't have InnerSource, you have another kind of closed source. Remember that InnerSource is closed source, right? We agree on that. InnerSource is private, proprietary source, or it is. It is, huh? So it is. Right? Yeah. I don't see you convinced. InnerSource is proprietary source. Develop the open style, the open way. Okay, good. Then you have to maximize contribution and creation. You have to create a dynamic environment in your company. And for that, values, open values, community over project, meritocracy, recognition rewards. That I talk about recognition around, so it will be good to see it. And problems that we find, and that's quite difficult. So valuation and ownership. So it's proprietary code. So there is an owner. This owner is your company, but what is your company? That's complicated. We are a group of companies, so the ownership could be in one of the subsidiary companies, right? Then who is the ownership? What happens? Well, it's the group. Let's say that we have the proper clauses in our license to identify that the proprietary is the group, because we want to be open. But let's say that we have a key project that, let's say, 80% is developed by a subsidiary. And let's imagine that this subsidiary is it's leading the group. What happens with this project? How do we return to that company the value invested? What was the value, by the way? Right? So that's the kind of questions we have to solve. Should we buy the project to recover the ownership for the group? Should we just leave the project go? And then that's a difficult question, okay? So that's what our focus today. So how to solve this valuation of the InnerSource, not just to explain to our CTOs, CIOs that InnerSource is valuable, but also what happens when the value is in dispute, right? And that's the why of the fourth dimension. So things change. That's it, it's like, right? So you have to think long term and the full picture. You have to see the full picture, right? So not only, as I was explaining, perhaps you have to transfer the ownership of a project, but also, and this is important for our strategy, for us, InnerSource is the incubation of open source in our company. So we don't want anymore to create open source that is not backed up by a big community. To create a big community, well, we have to find support inside our company. So InnerSource should be this incubating phase of our future open source if the project is important for us, right? And therefore, we have an InnerSource project that could move to open source. How are we transitioning from InnerSource to open source? Because InnerSource is relying perhaps in other InnerSource projects or other open source projects or even closed projects that are not InnerSource. So how do we manage this? We are also trying to define this and govern this from our posture. Okay. And one of the things we are, for example, now working on is what is the scope of our InnerSource. So what should we focus on? So this is the inverted triangle in your right. So we rely on, so at the end, you will have final products that will be, or platforms that will be used internally by your company. These platforms are InnerSource. So the downstream, the final product is InnerSource. It's interesting this for the company. It's a big question. But for sure, you want that this final product, that you want that to be an innovative product, should rely on open projects, on projects that follow open strategy, because open strategy means innovation and the inclusivity, meritocracy fosters innovation, right? So what is clear to us is that upstream InnerSource will be very good for our upstream proprietary, open but proprietary code. Obviously, we will rely on open source upstream too. It's very important to rely on open source. But what will be the final products? That's a big question. Okay, we are thinking perhaps to produce a few final InnerSource projects, but this is a big effort. Okay, because it's you have a final product, you scale this product, you disseminate this product in all the entities, and then an entity is divested, for example. Then you have to start with problems. We don't know. We are trying to answer this question. But anyway, what is clear is how we will be organized for openness. This triangle in the left, it's not our idea, it's a Red Hat's idea. So we are adopting the Red Hat's framework for organization, in which you take for granted that you have a core group. That is the group that is leading the InnerSource project. Every project starts with a core group, smaller or greater or bigger, but you have a core group. But in order to thrive and to be sustainable for the future, this core group must at least rely on an open group. You have to, this is related to the lurkers, so you have to create a community that will contribute, not only consume your project. This open group at the end will feed the core group if you foster meritocracy, right? So core group will select people from the open group to increase this core group. This group that will grow and will keep the project alive. If you have this big core group, then you can think about open source, about transitioning to open source. Why not? You have a big community or a strong community in your company. But also, in order to foster meritocracy, the core group must take executive decisions. So you have to bring leadership in the project. That's the open committee. So open committee are the end are representatives of the core group in the strategic decisions. And the important part here is that if you grow the core group with the open group, you also have to grow the open committee with leadership in other, let's say, if you are a big company, you have entities, leadership with other entities. So the project must be important for all the core entities leading the project. You cannot create a core group that is only managed by a single leadership in one entity or something. It's not like that, right? So it must be aligned. Leadership must be also shared. Okay, so the important part is this, that the core group is dynamic, it feeds from the open group, but also fosters, includes leadership on that represents the core group to take decisions, right? Then you need a framework. Okay, that's it's also important. So we have, again, so sandbox, this incubating process, it's also not our idea, it's a copy of CNCF, obviously. So, from the responsibility of the OSPO is to say that in open source, to communicate to the customers, in this case, in our inner world are the companies, our employees, to communicate if the project is good enough to be used in production, for example. And for that, we are trying to build this kind of healthiness map on many dimensions. You will see in the left, there are the maturity dimensions, with a specific focus on security. Security is always important. Also with maturity in engineering practices, and also maturity in InnerSource, practices, right? So what we try to depict here is that if you want to start this InnerSource journey, you have to quickly grow on security maturity, right? So you have to enter with a B grade, let's say, hypothetical B grade, and quickly grow to an A grade if you want to be considered graduated, and therefore, if it's graduated, will be adopted by more and more customers. Right? You also have to grow in engineering practices, perhaps not as strict as security, so more progressively, but you also have to increase your maturity in InnerSource. And this is more focused perhaps in the communities, right? You have to be more transparent, more inclusive, better communicate properly what is your roadmap, what is your change log. These grades here, novice, intermediate, advanced, and expert, are also part of the Red Hat's InnerSource package. It's linked to the previous slide. But at the end, the point is that in the OSPO, we are kind of granting these badges to the projects to clearly communicate to the customers what is the status of that project. So if it's just a sandbox project, it's not mature enough, or it's a graduated project adopted by many companies inside our corporations that can be safely used in production projects. Okay? That's kind of our framework. Well, this will be the life cycle of the framework, right? As you can see here, taken from the CRC. So, important takeaways here. Okay, you need or in our case, so the non-gray part is CNC. In our case, okay, if you want to embrace this journey, you have to be ready, right? So we have a readiness process that analyzes your status and recommends you to start or not start yet, because you have to enter this sandbox states, and when you enter the sandbox states, we are supposing that you have enough level of security maturity as well. Okay. So first of all, let's guide the teams to be ready. Then just use a maturity framework. We have chosen the CNCF1. An important part, be prepared to archive, but also to revitalize, okay? Why? Because again, the same story. So we don't have infinite money here, infinite energy. So the project is not succeeding. We should revitalize that project if it's interesting, or if it's spread at least in production systems around your company. So having a revitalization and archiving process is important for the life cycle of the components, but also to avoid important projects being there. But that's again an static thing, no? Project is moving, and this is how we kind of manage this chaos, right? So here is what I was mentioning about the prescriptive advocacy. So naturally, a project will have a maturity, and if the project is mature enough, this project will be adopted by the entity. This is what we call dissemination. Naturally, the project will be disseminated by the different components, right? Perhaps in production environments. Then, if it is disseminated and you are successful managing the communities, that will reinforce the maturity because you will grow that core group, right? That's the ideal one. But sometimes it doesn't happen. Perhaps you need money. You have to inject sponsorship, either with advocacy or with money, to keep this community thriving, or perhaps you have to help the entities to adopt your project. That's the prescriptive side, right? You have to inject prescription. Perhaps you have to inject prescription and say, guys, this is an important project. Let's draft the project. Let's adopt the project little by little. Let's cross this sandbox and incubating phase. Let's test it from all entities, right, and see if it's good or not. And also, at some point, perhaps you need also to inject money. So we are also seeing how we govern the sponsorship, perhaps having a tiger team or a center of excellence that temporarily helps projects to thrive. At the end, the point is that, this is an environment that is dynamic. You have to inject there, you have to interact with the environment and force the change happen. Either because you're investing in advocacy and you're explaining how to do things right, either because you have to inject money with these tiger teams or the extra effort to make the project evolve, or either because you have to force at some point say, guys, this is not the outer world, you have to use this project, because we will, it will be archived and we will have problems. So this dynamic view is also worth having into account. So this is the takeaways. There is more than one way to do it for sure. That's my Perl origin. I'm a old guy. Do you know what this is? In totally, there is more than one way to do it. You don't know it, but it was the Perl mantra years ago. Okay, but that's the point. Yeah? So InnerSource is not clear what it is. It depends on your company. So inside your company, it's your universe. You decide. And you have to take into account many topics, but also don't miss the evaluation. It's important to know what you are doing. Okay? Then people, it's normally comfortable not having lots of governances and processes. That's wrong, in my opinion. So you have to make things easy for the guys, but that means that the world is easy. The world is complex, so never stop building a comprehensive governance. Never stop making this governance easy for the guys. But you have to iterate. You have to start thinking about what happens if a company divests. What happens? You have to be prepared for it. So thin is good. Thick is also good. You have to plan it. And yeah, open is not. So that's why it's our choice. Perhaps you want to start being restrictive. We don't believe that. I think there are many ways of managing this. Here is the inner approach for others. Openness must be also applied in the inner universe. Okay. And if you want to discuss about openness, we are also interested in discussing what is openness in open source. I'm very interested. So open source has changed a lot. Now with the generative AI, it's even changing more. So what is freedom? What is permissiveness? What is proprietariness? It's not clear. We will see in the future. We will see. And that's it for today. Perhaps you have questions or remarks? No worries. My colleague Siracha, we can chat with you about anything they might. Or is interested. Sorry, no questions? The InnerSource and your open source?
Okay. So InnerSource is quite hard for companies to kind of get going with. Teams are very resistant. Are you finding, it sounds like you're quite mature, are you finding it's giving you the benefits you expect to see?
Well, it's curious because we started InnerSource this year because we needed it. At the end, we started on necessity, right? But we were discussing InnerSource 4 years, 3 or 4 years ago with different entities that wanted to create open code inside our company. So developers were asking us for InnerSource and we weren't ready 2-3 years ago. Now we want to do it because with generative AI we have to design, we have to create together agents, RAG, whatever. So it's very important today to build it together. But the necessity was there already. So for us it's hard because now we have to provide the right framework for developers in the scope of generative AI today. It's hard because we have to react to this problem today, but it wasn't hard to put the idea of InnerSource in our developers' mind.
People doing it, people contributing to somebody else's code owned by other things.
Yeah, people was already doing it,
Okay.
but perhaps not with enough material.
Yeah.
It was more a lift and shift, so I put here a code, somebody wants a code. Well, that's not sustainable, so we have to manage this, but it was already done. Now it's more of this prescriptive way. So hey, we have to build it from scratch altogether, right? But this is that's hard job, sure.
We have been building for a long time ago a big community inside AXA, because as Carlos mentioned, we are a lot of companies inside AXA group, and we are working very hard to create this sense of community and collaboration and to sharing knowledge. And this is the right moment to make the ecosystem work together.
And I think it's the same in many companies now. It looks like InnerSource now is getting more and more important everywhere. Thank you. That's all.